Have you ever wanted to create a pivot table based on multiple sheets? For example, here we have sales data for January, February, and March. By default, pivot tables only work with one sheet, so you can't really analyze the total sales for these. Sure, you could copy and paste the data into one sheet, but what if it updates? Luckily, there is a way to do this, so let me show you with 3 different scenarios. First, when you have the same column headers, just different data like sales for January, February, and other months. Secondly, when you have completely different data, so different headers, but there is one column in common, for example, the ID number. And finally, when you have entirely separate Excel files instead of just separate Excel sheets. So let's get into it. In the first scenario, suppose we have 3 different sheets for January, February, and March. You can see they have the same column headers, but we would like to combine all of the data so we can analyze it with pivot tables. And you can download the same Excel file in the video description to follow along. The first step should be to convert all of your data into tables by pressing Ctrl T if you haven't already. Then we just want to head over to Data, and under the Get Data dropdown, we want to go to Launch Power Query Editor. This might look a bit new to you, but it's actually super easy to use. All you need to do is head over to New Source, and here we want to select the relevant file, which is an Excel workbook for us. I've saved mine in my desktop and it's called Scenario 1. It might be somewhere else for you, but I'm just gonna go ahead and import it. And here you'll be able to see all of the 3 different tables, and to select more than one, we just want to go to select multiple items up top and just select all 3 here. Then we're going to click on OK. So we have all 3 tables loaded up and we want to create a combined one that's going to be dynamic. For that, we can go over to Append Queries here and append queries as new. Because we have more than 2 tables, we're gonna click on this part here and just double click on each of these that's not there. So table 1, 2, and 3, we can add an order to them. So let's go 1, 2, and 3 in order like so, and click on OK. Now you can see there's this new query called append, and if we look within it, we have all our January data, February, and even the month of March. So we're ready to apply that into Excel. We're gonna click on this Close and Load dropdown and go to Close and Load to. Because we want a pivot table, we're gonna select on that one and click on OK. This might take a while to load, but you can see we have all 3 tables like we did before, just the January, February, and March. But we also have this append one, which basically has all the information combined. So I can select the different dates here. Let me actually move those to the rows. And you can see we have not just the January data, but also the February and March. So I can see the breakdown of all of the months and all of the revenues for each of them with the total too. Even better, if you have any changes to the original data, it can also update inside of the pivot table. So let's suppose in the month of January, I'm just gonna add here a very large number like so, just so we can clearly see the change after. All we need to do is save this, so Ctrl S there. And then under table 1, we're going to refresh all of this data by going to Pivot Table Analyze and clicking on the refresh button. And now that it's refreshed, you can see the month of January has a huge number compared to all the other months because of this edit we made here. But let's be honest, life isn't always that simple. What if you have columns that don't have the exact same names? Then this method no longer works, but let me show you an alternative. Before we do that, if you want to learn Excel and other in-demand data skills, I'd recommend you check out our Data Analyst program. It consists of 4 individual courses and over 300 lessons. First, in Excel, you'll learn best practices for formatting, formulas, and charts. Then you'll apply your skills with real-life case studies, from data cleaning to building a dynamic financial model. Then in Power BI, you'll dive into data visualization and create interactive dashboards to extract maximum insight from your data. Thirdly, in SQL, you'll work with larger databases, writing SQL queries, and even connecting the databases with applications like Excel and Power BI. Finally, in VBA and macros, you learn to automate tasks like generating pivot tables, P&L reports, and much more. So whether you're in or looking for a career as a data analyst, business analyst, or financial analyst, Head over to a link in the description below to gain the skills you need to thrive in today's data-driven world. Looking at scenario number 2, here we have a different Excel file that just has sales data and some information on some stores. So it's clearly very different columns, but they do have one column in common, which is the store ID right here and the store ID over here on this side. Based on that, we want to create a connection. For this, we can head over to data, and instead of going to get data like before, we'll go to the right where we have this icon and click on relationships. In this pop-up, we want to create a new relationship that's going to be firstly the table number 1 and the table number 2. Within it, what do we have in common? That's going to be the store ID and the store ID from this other side as well. They don't necessarily have to have the same column name, so this one could be called something else and it would still be able to connect. Click on OK and now press on close. At first, it might not look like anything happened, but actually when we go to insert and go to the pivot table drop down here, we can go to from data model. That's what we've just done, and we want to create that into a new worksheet. Within the fields here, you can see we have table 1 data and we also have table 2 data. So for example, just using table 1, I could take the store ID over here and also the quantity sold for each store. The problem is just the store ID really doesn't give us much information. On the sales tab, that's really all we have about the store details. That said, on the store tab, we have a lot more information like where the store is located or who the manager is. Luckily, because we've combined these two pivot tables, we can go ahead and select that data, like for example, the country, and we can see that inside of the store ID. Same thing with, let's say, the general manager name, even though that was something in a separate sheet. The scenarios we've seen so far all work with one Excel file, but what happens when we have multiple Excel files? For example, over here you can see we have data for just the month of January, and in a separate Excel file we have data for the month of February, and we would like to combine that into creating one pivot table that we can analyze. For this, we just want to select any of the files and go to Data, Get Data, and launch the Power Query Editor. Once in here, under New Source, instead of just selecting an Excel workbook, which we can do first for number 1, so the January sales, and then we just want to repeat that same process for another source. So here, I'm just gonna select the one table, and I can do the same thing with the second one, so File again, Excel workbook, and this time it's going to be my February sales. Let me select that table over here and click on OK. This might be a bit tedious, so what happens if you have something like 12 Excel files? There is a way to do this faster, which under New Source, File, instead of selecting an Excel workbook, if you selected a folder where you had all of your data, so for all the 12 months, then you could go by folder and it would import every Excel file within that folder. In the future, if you were to add more Excel files into that folder, those would also be included. So for now, let's suppose we're happy with these two. The next steps are much like before, so append queries as new. And we only have two tables, so it's gonna be table 1 and table 2. Click on OK. And now we're ready by pressing close and load to, and we want to select a pivot table report. Click on OK there. And once this loads up, we can select the different dates, and you can see here that we have both the January data and the February data as well. We've just learned how to combine multiple Excel sheets into one pivot table, but it's also very important to know how to split one Excel file into several sheets. And for that, you can watch this video over here to learn more about it, or take our Excel course over here. Hit that like and that subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.